episode 9, For My Sons, aka The Man Show. For the quick tip, we're going to talk about all things testosterone. Why is it important? Well, first of all, what is it? Why is it important? And a whole bunch of different ways to get your tea up, right? For the main topic, we're going to talk about masculinity. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a masculine man? And because I'm a Christian man, what does it mean to be a biblical masculine man? Okay. For the first random topic, we're actually going to do a book review. I had the pleasure of reading this one book entitled Muscular Christianity, and I thoroughly enjoyed the book. In fact, there are a lot of segments from that book that link to what the SCAL method is. So there, let's just say I have a whole bunch of good things to say about it, right? And then for the second random topic, I get a little bit more serious here. In the sense that so this topic actually came from one of my clients. So shout out to Naveed. This was a big, it kind of opened my eyes a little bit and it made me think quite a bit. But this topic is basically about technology and how there are very present, very active dangers in technology right now as I speak. And how the balance of technology and humanity has shifted so much towards technology that we don't really realize how it's probably making us less efficient and making us more polarized when in fact it was supposed to do the opposite. So, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. Listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Live Studio. And you're listening to the SCAL Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only just physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Let's get to the episode. All right. Let's talk about testosterone, or as Bernie Mac once called it, testosterone. Oh man, Bernie Mac. But yeah. So let's talk about testosterone. Testosterone. When you hear that word, what do you think? What do you think of? Right? Do you think of bodybuilders? Maybe do you think of burly men, loud, bombastic, angry men? Do you think of these multiple women having misogynist, whatever you want to call them? What do you think of when you hear the word testosterone, right? So a lot of people tend to think those things, but I would argue that it's the exact opposite of all that stuff, right? So testosterone essentially is the male sex hormone, right? And it's vital in developing males, right? But it's vital in developing males, and it's vital in developing male characteristics or masculine characteristics, right? It needs to be in balance, of course, right? Because even women have a little bit of testosterone. But all of it has to be in balance. But it's absolutely vital, mission critical for men and for men to be able to maintain a healthy lifestyle, or a healthy life, rather. So it's, testosterone. I'm sorry, let me stop doing that before I really start calling it that. Testosterone is very important in that sense, okay? But so why is it important in that sense? So what does it do, right? So first and foremost, testosterone. I was just getting ready to say testosterone. Okay, I think I messed myself up. All right. Reset. Okay, I'm back. So testosterone, it helps regulate fat accumulation and distribution. Right. Of course, I will start there, kind of, sort of. Right. But it regulates sex drive. It also basically is responsible for improving or keeping proper bone density. It also regulates lean muscle tissue accumulation and strength accumulation, right? It regulates production of red blood cells. I mean, it does so many different things. It affects your mood, and that's the one I really want to dig in. I'll dig in as we go along, but it affects your mood in ways that I don't think the general public fully understands. Let me put it that way, okay? But it does all of those things, and so that's why it's so vital for men. So when you have low testosterone, how does that present typically? As it declines in men, many physiological and psychological processes become impaired. So you have issues. So think, I listed off everything that it is responsible for, regulating and improving on, right? So just think the opposite here. So testosterone is key in building lean muscle tissue and strength. So a decreased amount of testosterone, or if you have low T, it's really hard for you to build lean muscle tissue. It's really hard for you to maintain lean muscle tissue. And it's even harder for you to gain or maintain strength. And I've went over the importance of lean muscle tissue. Lean muscle tissue is super vital for, again, this is how you lead to all these health issues with lower lean muscle tissue. It leads to metabolic issues. It leads to heart issues. So again, lean muscle tissue equals life in this case. Low T means low lean muscle tissue, which means low life. I think you get the point, right? Low testosterone also leads to lower bone density. So your bones become frail and brittle. Not cool, right? Obviously, low testosterone leads to low sex drive. Ugh. No dude really wants that, right? So yeah, nah. That's not good. All right, I won't dig too much in it. Low testosterone also leads to a plethora of psychological effects, right? And I actually want to dig into that a little bit more. But let me backtrack really quick when it comes to the lower, it basically decreases your sexual function. So you have lower sperm count, erectile dysfunction becomes a problem. All of these are kind of, symptoms of low testosterone. Okay. So now let me jump past that real quick. So I spoke of emotional fitness, episode 3, right? Having a sound heart, right? Low testosterone makes it more difficult for you to achieve emotional fitness. There are a lot of various negative emotions associated with low T, right? And this is where I stated at the beginning, where it's just like, well, is the angry, loud, bombastic man, does he have too much testosterone? No. In fact, he might actually be the exact opposite, because some of the psychological effects of having low testosterone deal with mood swings. So with lower testosterone, there's decreased motivation. There's decreased, and in fact, your outlook of the world changes with lower testosterone, which is crazy in a number of different ways, right? And also, I think I already said, you have decreased motivation, and you actually worry more. So you have increased worries. You're less able to handle stress. You're more prone to mood swings, and you're more prone to those mood swings expressing themselves as anger, sadness, like all of the hyper negative, extreme negative emotions. You're more likely to experience those with low testosterone than you are with high testosterone. In fact, most of the people with high testosterone end up being, if they're naturally high, mind you, naturally high testosterone, they're probably some of the healthiest men on the face of this planet. So I always found it very interesting that a lot of people associate some of the negatives that are associated with, just they're just jerk dudes, but they associate those negatives with having too much testosterone, when in fact it's the opposite. And I dig a little bit more into the emotional fitness, but not even just emotional fitness, and mental fitness as well, right? Because it also affects you cognitively. It just, low T makes it harder to concentrate. Okay, so with both of those hits to emotional fitness and your mental fitness, that, as I said, a few minutes ago, it changes your outlook of everything, right? You're more likely to have a negative outlook on all of these things. In fact, there are a whole bunch of studies that back this stuff up. So much so, like, there were a few studies. I think one was done in like 2012 and another was done in 2016. I'm not sure if they might have done another one. And I just stumbled on these studies just, it was really random, but I stumbled on these studies that showed that even your political affiliation changes based on your testosterone levels, which is very interesting. So, like, they said basically that because, and look, take it for what it is. This is just what the studies kind of showed, right? And I'm not making any statement of one is good or bad or whatever, but it's just, this is what the study showed, that basically men who were lower on a testosterone scale were more likely to be liberal, and they were more likely to have a negative outlook of the world. And then I think one or two of those studies kind of changed things. Now, again, I'm not trying to debate or argue anything political or anything like that. I'm just making the point that your testosterone levels definitely do affect your mood, but it also affects you psychologically. If it affects your mental fitness, for sure, absolutely. Okay, so I won't necessarily dig too much into that, but there are more studies that basically present the same thing, but just not on a political level, where it's just like you're more likely to be depressed with low testosterone. And so then let me go back to the physiological effects just a little bit, right? So you can imagine, with all of these things that happen because of low testosterone, your chances of developing any of the major diseases that are killing people out there skyrockets. So low testosterone typically leads to heart disease, cardiovascular disease, metabolic syndrome, right? You're more, and the thing is, it's almost like a trickle down effect or a trickle up effect. I don't know which way you want to look at it, but it's like, it's one thing leads to another, leads to another, leads to another. Okay, and it's a killer of men out here. Because especially when you get to like some of the stats, I mean, heart disease is one of the biggest killers, if not the number one leading killer in the world, I think, at least in America again, right? So then you talk about like just the physiological effects, but then there's also the psychological effects. And this one kind of breaks my heart a little bit, and I'll explain why. But you're more likely to be depressed with low testosterone, right? So there are more studies out there that show that the overall testosterone levels of men have been decreasing over the last 30 years, independent of age, right? So as we age, we typically lose around 1% of our testosterone each year, right? From 30 on. These studies show that, not even including age, so like if you have a 40-year-old, they're supposed to be at a particular testosterone level on average, right? Again, we're talking about averages. We're not talking all men. Understand overlapping distributions here. So we're talking on average. The men who were 40 years old, they were supposed to be at this level of testosterone, and they were at that 30 years ago. They are lower now. So all across the board, testosterone levels of men have been decreasing. And now, the part is, they say, a lot of people say, no one can really conclusively say that we know why this is happening, but you can kind of take a guess at it, right? We exercise less. We sit on our behinds more. More of us are obese. More of us are stressed. Like the stresses now are very different than the stresses 30 years ago, right? And I don't even really think you had to question masculinity 30 years ago, but somehow it's a real big question now. Like, and that leads to a lot of different stressors, right? Set aside the fact that our food, our water, our air is completely different now than it was 30 years ago. Some say it's better, others say it's worse. There's chemicals in this, there's chemicals in that. There's a definite difference though. And I would say anecdotally that that would be a pretty big contributor to declining testosterone levels. But I say that, and again, I'm talking about the psychological effects, right? So, I just went through explaining physiological stuff. What does that mean? So what that means is like because testosterone levels have been decreasing over the last 30 years, independent of age, men are now more likely to be unmotivated and depressed. And that's actually showing up in numbers because what is depression? Depression is, in this case, for the sake of this conversation, depression is the number one leading risk factor for suicide. And if you look at the suicide numbers, present day, they're alarming. Men account for like 79% of suicides. 79% of suicides, that's men right there. And the numbers on men who did not die by suicide, but who were harmed in attempts, those numbers are even more staggering. So there is a little bit of a link there where it's just like the testosterone levels are declining, depression, lack of motivation, that's probably on the rise. So then that's another output of, or potential output. I'm not saying that low T is the only cause of any of this stuff. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm saying it's a force behind it. Now, I wonder how many studies are going to come out to really draw that link from low T all the way to that point. I don't know. It doesn't seem that it doesn't seem to be that important. So the next question. So here's what we're presented with. We have this table full of like negative stuff, things that we have to deal with. So how do we deal with it? How do I propose we move forward? And what are my suggestions in this case? And there's advice coming for sure. Because what I'm not saying, I'm not telling you to go out there and rush and get your TRT. I'm not telling you to rush out and get your T injections. In fact, that can make matters worse. There's a bunch of studies. You can go anywhere and find these studies, right? So, if you inject yourself with testosterone, your body will stop producing testosterone. And then what? And you'll be forever on it. So it's not the pathway. The pathway is to increase your testosterone naturally. Now, how do you do that? So what I'm saying is you can increase your testosterone naturally through a well thought out and constructed exercise plan, a planned out diet, some healthy relationships, a positive way to manage stress. That's a big one. And a planned, relatively planned, but like a thought out, at least thought about recovery plan. All of those are important in raising your testosterone if you need to. But first and foremost, before you can even get there, you need to know your levels. You need to know if you do actually have low T. Because you could be, I mean, if you don't know where you are, you don't know where you're going, right? So you need to know what your levels are. I got tested at 30, and I have another one coming up. 30 was my baseline, because from 30, 30 years of age, you lose a percent of testosterone from that point on. So that was my baseline. I know some guys who get tested every other year just to make sure their levels are in check. I know some other guys who are on some other things and they always check it. So it's just different strokes. But my suggestion is you need a baseline. You need something first. So get your levels tested, see where you are, and then you can make adjustments if you need to from there. A lot of you might find that you're in normal range. But keep in mind, with a normal range, those numbers are adjusted and kind of are on a sliding scale. I'm not going to dig too much into that in general, but just make sure that you get your testosterone levels checked and then match up based on that from there, okay? So when it comes to exercise, you have to do a program of both resistance training and aerobic training. So maybe 3 days resistance, 2 days aerobic, but both are required to raise your T, right? The next thing, in terms of diet, you want to, well, in general, any healthy diet will do, but you want to get a bunch of foods that are rich in like selenium, vitamin D, zinc especially, right? You want to get foods that are rich in those things. Oh, and your omegas. Don't forget your omegas. You want to get foods that are rich in, I think, omega-3s. Just get both just in case. But you want a diet that's rich in those types of foods, okay? When it comes down to, ways to de-stress and all that fun stuff, you got to find a hobby. Find something fun to do, that'll something new to learn. I mean, in the last episode, that's what I was talking, or 2 episodes ago, whatever it was, I was talking about why I picked up golf, right? This is kind of one of those reasons too, right? You want to lead a healthy lifestyle as well, right? But also hang out with friends. Just skip the smoking and the alcohol. There's nothing that will kill your T faster than smoking and alcohol especially. So hang out with friends, build healthy relationships. That's all good. Just skip the smoking and the alcohol. You'll be fine, right? And also recovery, get your sleep. Testosterone spikes in your sleep. You recover in your sleep. Muscle protein synthesis and all that fun stuff, well, it actually breaks down stuff, but all that fun stuff happens in your sleep. Get your sleep. So running off of 4 hours of sleep every day ain't gonna cut it, right? That will for sure lead to low T, right? Boost your testosterone, get around. I mean, there's different recommendations based on age and all that fun stuff. I haven't heard anything lower than 6 hours. So at the very least, 6 hours of sleep. I don't think that's optimal though. I mean, aim for like 6.5, 7 hours of sleep. 8 is kind of out the question for a lot of people. So, but don't go below 6 at all, right? Give your body the time it needs to recover. Get your sleep. Okay, so that's what you do. So right there, I listed off what is testosterone, what are the benefits of having an adequate testosterone levels, what happens when you have low T. Avoid low T like the plague, okay? Bump what everybody else is saying about testosterone's bad, this, that, and the third. It is not, okay? And again, it does not lead to all these erratic behaviors. Lack of testosterone leads to erratic behavior. Lack of testosterone for men leads to death. Take that with you, okay? Get your T up. Here we go. We are on to the main topic of this episode, and I call it for my sons because I'm treating this as, and I've said a bunch of these things to my sons already, but I'm treating this as if I'm talking directly to my boys. And I want to teach them about what it means to be a masculine man. I'm teaching them about masculinity. And I'm going to the Bible for this, but I want to be very clear here about this notion, right? Just because I'm going to the Bible, you, the listener or the viewer, don't necessarily have to be religious to find something useful from this. I just understand that there is a particular structure that things were made in, and I'm applying that structure to what I think is missing currently nowadays. But even beyond that, if you think about throughout all of history, organized religion has provided a framework for men to be men, like almost throughout all of history. So that's the only reason why I'm going back to that. Of course, not the only reason. I mean, that's the secondary reason. The main reason is because I'm a Christian. So I'm going back to that, of course. I'm going to point to Christ to be able to understand what a masculine man should be. But I'm also going in a few other places as well, okay? But again, I just wanted to kind of give that, maybe it's a disclaimer. I don't know, but I would like for y'all to hang with me for a little bit as I talk to my boys a little bit here, right? And I know they're listening to it right now, and I just want to open up with, boys, I love you dearly. Y'all know I got y'all back, no matter what, through everything. There is nothing that you can't come to me about, and you can trust and believe that I'm going to lead you down the right path. And before I start to get all whatever, let me, man, I might have to cut. Let's move on. Okay, so in order to understand what a masculine man is, in order to understand what masculinity is, we have to first go to why was man created? Now, again, I get it, well, man wasn't created. Okay, cool. Just hang with me, okay? Why was man created, right? Man was created to, first and foremost, walk with God. Then man was created to work or to labor, right? Man was created to produce some result from their labor and produce that result abundantly. And lastly, man was created to reign, to rule over his assignment, over his house, over all of the things, his environment, all of those things that God has placed under his stewardship. Okay, so let's break that down again, right? We're starting here. Man was created to walk with God, to work, to produce, to reign. All right? Now, why did I start there? Because those things give men purpose. Those things help man avoid loneliness. And the lack of purpose and the loneliness are two of the biggest detractors of masculinity in the modern era. Okay? Especially like right now, I can't tell you how many times in the past week, I've heard of men being lonely and doing something crazy. Or men being lonely look, even the last episode, I was talking about professional cuddlers. That's primarily for lonely men. And I'm not even faulting the men, right? There's a lot of nuance involved in that, okay? But those are the two big things. Lack of purpose has always been a kill. Idle hands kill. Point blank, period, right? I know these are strong statements, but you don't have to try too hard to draw the lines between somebody who doesn't have a purpose and somebody who ends up doing something that's traumatizing to someone else. Now, as I break down each one of these things, I'm going to be going back and forth with my notes because there's a lot of different Bible verses that I actually want to read through, okay? And we'll start with man was created to walk with God. Now, what does that mean exactly, right? And I want to start off with first verse is actually in the beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3, verse 8. Okay, and that basically says, and of course I'm reading from the King James version. That's just what are all those other versions? All right. And Genesis 3:8 says, "And they heard the voice of the Lord God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. And Adam and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord amongst the trees of the garden." So what does that say, right? And just like, that's simply just, that was it. It was like, wait, why was God walking through the garden, basically? And it was like, what that implies is that God and Adam had often, and it looked like Eve as well, had often walked with God in the garden. It was like, hey, let's take our afternoon walk. So they were chilling, they were communing together, right? So what that breaks down to is we're created to walk with God in companionship and communication and in shared rule, right? So God created all of those things in the garden and created the whole earth. And there was Adam that God gave dominion over his creations, right? So basically, God and Adam were ruling the garden. So that is the point that kind of stands out the most to me when it comes to this, is that man was created to walk with God. Okay. I think another verse that I wanted to just real quick touch on was in Micah 6:8, and that says, I'm gonna bring it up here. "He hath showed me, O man, what is good, and what doth the Lord require of thee, but to do justly, and to love mercy, and to walk humbly with thy God." So basically, it's just saying right there, the responsibility of man is to, again, do justly, love mercy, and walk with God. So that's a very, very important starting point there. Man was created to walk with God. So the second thing is, man was created to work, to labor. So, the statement that I want to make, so it's basically like, masculine men work. And I'm going to Genesis 2:15 to kind of break it down real quick. And actually, I have a couple other verses that are coming to mind. So I might make a little bit of a remix here. But Genesis 2:15 says, "And the Lord God took the man and put him in the Garden of Eden to dress it and to keep it." Now, in this instance, to dress means to cultivate, to prune, to work, essentially. And to keep means to protect. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically, God made it. So let's backtrack a little bit, because there's this weird thing going around saying that, well, so sometimes I don't hear too many Christians say it now, but it was weird when I first heard it. It was just like, well, before the fall, before the curse, there was no work. Yes, there was. That's literally why God made him. God made Adam to work. He put him in the garden to dress it, to keep it. Means to work in it and protect it, right? So there was definitely work beforehand. The only thing what the curse makes it harder to do. But there was for sure work before Adam messed it all up. Please note I said Adam messed it all up, not Eve. But that's a different subject. We'll get there. So another verse I want to talk about concerning work, right? So God made Adam to work. God made man to work. So masculine men work. And again, we're pointing to another masculine man in Christ. And basically in John chapter 5, verse 17. John chapter 5, verse 17. "But Jesus answered them." Now, okay, so this is a point in time where the the people of that time were basically coming at Jesus's neck because he was working on a Sabbath day, right? So he basically responded and said, "My Father worketh hitherto, and I work." So basically, Jesus was working, and he didn't, all the other practices and all that other fun stuff, basically was just like, that doesn't matter. I'm here for a reason. I'm here to work. But there's another part in that verse. I think we're in that chapter. It's in verse 36, I believe. "But I have greater witness than that of John, for the works which the Father hath given me to finish, the same works that I do." And I didn't, and then ... But so Jesus had work. He had work to do. He came there. So what is that telling you? That's purpose. That's purpose. Work. God created us to work. God created us to have purpose. That's major. Okay. So we want to, it's like what's the opposite of that? Or what's the opposite of that? The opposite of that is laziness, slothfulness, right? You cannot have a lazy man who is a masculine man. They don't go together at all whatsoever. A lazy man is not in any shape, any way, in any form, a masculine man. So, again, masculine men work. Now, as a result of the work, as a result of the labor, man was created to produce and produce abundantly, right? I'm going here. Genesis 1:28. "And God blessed them, and God said unto them, Be fruitful, and multiply, and replenish the earth, and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the air, and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." That is a charge there. That's a pretty big mission statement that we got laid on us there, right? But basically, we were created to produce and produce abundantly, but produce fruit. Said differently, we were created to produce a good result for our labor. Okay? Again, that whole be fruitful thing, a lot of people take it and they say, well, yeah, make lots of babies. Sure. But in this instance, the fruit is actually, like what I just said, a good result for your labor. So your labor actually has to produce something good, and it has to produce it in abundance. How much? Enough to fill the earth, right? So it's not just about making babies. It's about continuously producing fruit, continuously filling the earth up with good fruit. All right. So masculine men not only work, not only labor, God created created man to not only work and not only labor, but produce a good result from that labor and produce it in abundance. Okay. And I know that word is kind of a abundance, right? Because it's kind of been used and overused, especially within certain Christian circles, but it's not a word to be afraid of, right? And I don't mean it in terms of any prosperity gospel mess or anything like that. I mean it literally as what we are called to do as men. We ought to work, and we ought to produce something from that work in abundance, right? And it has to be something good. So this last thing here, man was created to rule, to reign. Right? That's the last portion. And I'm going back to that same verse again, right? So Genesis 1:28, I'm gonna break it down one more time. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but the part that I'm gonna dig into is we're supposed to be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, really basically produce produce good enough to fill the earth, right? And subdue it and have dominion. Subdue and have dominion. That means place everything under your rule. Okay? So all of this stuff was given to be to be worked on, to be cared for, to be promoted, to grow, to be protected, and then to be ruled over. And that's the thing, right? So, what are we talking about here specifically, right? Like, okay, yeah, sure, the fish of the sea and so on and so forth, but we're talking about three things in particular here that a masculine man rules over. Okay, they rule over their assignment. Okay, first and foremost, they rule over the job, the purpose that God has given them. What are they here to do? You, as a masculine man, you ought to rule over that, right? Next thing, rule over the environment, right? Now, I know how this sounds so far, right? It's almost like, hey, you don't care about the environment. But I think what I'm going to dig into a little bit more is, what is actual leadership? What is rulership? What does it mean to reign? Okay? Because when I tell you the whole story, it'll make perfect sense. What I mean, when I say, hey, a masculine man rules over his assignment and rules over the environment. But he also, last but not least, rules over his home. Okay? And this is where we get into some sticky situations, so to speak, because modern day everything will tell you that that's a misogynistic idea. And I could see what people are kind of getting at there, but they're wrong. To say the least. Like that's actually notice what's going out there in the culture compared to what the truth is. What's out in the culture is the exact opposite of the truth. And then it's so deceiving, and it's so tricky that it has populations of people believing a lie as if it's true. So I'm not stepping into any of the realm of misogyny because, yes, while it exists, this is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about masculine men ruling and being masculine and ruling over their assignment, the environment, and their homes. Now, how does that play out, though? I'm going to describe that a little bit more. So, as I mentioned before, we were created to have purpose. We were created to work. That work is our purpose. So with that, there are different men who have different skills and different talents and and they're in different places. So like everybody, they're to rule over their assignment, because not everybody has the same assignment though, right? But they're supposed to rule over their assignment. A masculine man rules over his assignment, but he also rules over his environment. But what does rule mean? What does rule mean when it comes to your environment, when it comes to your home, when it comes to your assignment? Be good stewards of. Meaning, you're supposed to take care of it. Meaning, you're supposed to promote it to grow. Meaning, you're supposed to work in a way that produces good for your assignment, for your environment, and for your home. That does not mean dictate. That does not mean throw out harsh command. That does not mean treat any old way that you feel like treating. Hear me when I'm telling you this. To rule and to reign as a masculine man means to steward, to promote growth, to take care of. And when I say be good stewards of, now we're really breaking it down into the nuts and bolts of this thing. That means be a good manager. Manage in a way that promotes growth, that promotes good. Again, for your assignment, for your environment, for your home. Catch this though. That same charge was also given to women. So in order for women to actually be a feminine woman, she has to do the same thing, just in different ways. That's a little bit opposite of what the culture is trying to tell you. Don't fall for that. But again, back to men. Rule over your assignment. Rule over your environment. Rule over your home. Make sure they're good. Make sure they grow. Be good stewards of. Be good managers of. Okay? All right, so what are the qualities of a masculine man? Okay? Like are they the hyper aggressive ones? Like do they show hyper aggressiveness? Or maybe they're interested in, car sports and women, right? Or maybe they have multiple encounters with women, right? Or even maybe they're the thinking, dark, brooding type, like Batman. So what are the qualities of a masculine man, right? So first and foremost, a masculine man knows how to and is able to, on a regular basis, regulate their emotions. But not only just that, they're able to regulate their emotions also while kind of putting a cap on and not falling prey to their own passions and desires. Okay? So that's a big thing. So on episode 3, I talked about one of the anchor points to the Scal method, a sound heart. I'm basically making the case for emotional fitness there. So how do you regulate your emotions, train your emotions, so on and so forth. Go back to that episode because there's a lot of practical advice, but I also dig into great detail what it means to regulate your emotions. So back on this one, masculine men can regulate their emotions. Going even deeper into that, right? They know when to and how to express emotion, right? What that means is they're not driven by their anger. They're not fueled by their lust. And they will definitely not sob for show. They understand that there's a time and a place for everything. And that's not to say that they don't feel those emotions. They just know when to express them. So that's another part to this. Because they're not ruled by their feelings, not only do they know how to regulate their feelings, but they know how to properly express their feelings, right? So masculine men can regulate their emotions, and they do not fall prey to their own lusts. Masculine men are also providers, right? They're providers. Look, 1 Timothy, I'm bringing up my phone again. 1 Timothy 5:8. It has some pretty harsh words for men who do not provide for their own household, but for people who are also close to them, right? Listen. So 1 Timothy 5:8 says, "But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel." So those are some pretty harsh words for men who do not provide for people around them. But here's the kicker, though. The kicker is this is not just money, right? This is not just providing a financial amount to people or to your household, right? This is also, this could be food, this could be various resources, but also, and we're going to kind of go up on an important scale here, you can also provide opportunities and most importantly, time. This is why masculine men are important. They are vital to a healthy society because masculine men uplift everyone around them. Masculine men are protectors. Now, remember earlier on, I was telling you about we're going back to Genesis 2:15 again, right? God created man to And he put him in the garden to dress it and to keep it. Now, I went over the dress it part. That's the work. That's the work you need to do concerning your assignment, your environment, and your home. On the back end, to keep means to guard and to protect, right? That means we are to protect, we are to guard our assignment, our environment, and our homes, okay? Think about it, right? We're called to work on those things. We're called to, we're called to cultivate and keep, or cultivate and protect, or cultivate and guard, and or to work on and guard, or work on and protect, right? That's we are basically created to be protectors. A quality of a masculine man is he is a protector, and that occurs on all levels of mentally, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Men protect their assignments, their environments, and their homes on all of those different levels. Now, as an offshoot of that, masculine men protect and are defenders of truth. Okay, I'm going to go to 1 Peter 3:15 here. Okay, and it says, "But sanctify the Lord God in your hearts, and be ready always to give an answer to every man that asketh you a reason of the hope that is in you, with meekness and fear, having a good conscience, that whereas they speak evil of you as of evildoers, they may be ashamed that falsely accuse your good conversation in Christ." So basically, what that comes down to is that masculine men protect the truth, defend the truth. This is especially true of a biblically masculine man. But also, keep in mind, this is not just, masculine men don't just defend God's word. They defend truth all the way around, meaning lies cannot abide near or around a masculine man. They do not propagate lies. They do not propagate gossip, right? Masculine men call a spade a spade. Those are the guys who keep it 100 with you, right? Masculine men are strong and they have endurance. Okay, so I'm going to start with the physical part here first, right? And well, let me preface this a little bit. I think episode 6, the main topic there was endurance. So building up physical endurance, mental endurance, emotional endurance, spiritual endurance. That I don't need to break that down again, but there's another episode that is full of detail and full of actionable items that you can use, that you can place into your life, like processes that you can do when it comes to endurance and kind of beefing up your endurance here. I urge you to listen to that episode, because if you're listening to this right now and you're trying to understand what quality a masculine man has, it would do you some good to go back to that episode, because all of those things concerning endurance, that's what masculine men have. Okay, but as a quick note here, with the physicalities, yeah, physicality does matter. Okay, masculine men are strong, and I don't want this to get lost in the shuffle where it's just like, well, a weak man is not a masculine man, and I don't want to get into that debate per se, but I will say this: it does matter how strong you are physically. It does, because there are actual situations that happen in reality in which you will need strength. So if you question whether you need strength at all for this, that, and the third, or you're more of an intellectual, that's perfectly fine. So be it. But masculine men are strong, not they're physically strong, not comparatively, but intrinsically. Meaning there's always somebody out there that's going to be stronger than you, but you should still be strong for you. You should still train your body to be as strong as it can be. Okay. And I really want to drive that point home. It's not, I'm stronger than this guy, I'm stronger than that guy. I'm as strong as I can be. That is key, right? So masculine men are as strong as they can be, and they consistently test their body and build up their body to be strong in all arenas. Masculine men are servant oriented, right? Or service oriented. They're basically servant leaders, right? They serve everyone that they are connected to. They choose to serve everyone every single person that they're connected to, even their enemies. Keeping it simple, they help those in need, and they ultimately take responsibility for pumping up, I guess, the needs of others. They essentially put the needs of others above their own. They are selfless. Masculine men are sacrificial. As a continuation to this, so I have a verse here too, but masculine men think outwards before they think inwards, right? So I'm going to go to 1 Corinthians 13:11, and says, when I was a child, I spake as a child. I understood as a child. I thought as a child. But when I became a man, I put away childish things. All right, so that's pretty clear, right? A masculine man speaks, thinks, and reasons like a man. So you have a child who is completely, most children are, all children are, especially like an infant. Think of an infant. They're completely self-centered, right? Because that is necessary for their survival. There are a lot of things that they cannot do on their own. So what do they require? They require just a simple a way of communicating to tell other people to get in line and to do what they need them to do, right? It's solely about fulfilling their desires and their needs, right? The funny thing is, like, there's parents, they center their lives on their kids during that time, so on and so forth, right? Again, because it's a survival thing for the child. They cannot survive on their own, so this is what they require. But as you become more mature as a man, that scale starts to slide away in terms of you're not thinking of just fulfilling your own desires. A masculine man thinks more about fulfilling others' needs before doing anything with himself. And let me stay there for a quick second, because I would argue that modern day masculinity, if you want to call it that, is almost entirely self-centered, right? But the part is, I actually understand why it is, or potentially why it is. I think part of the reason why masculinity present day is self-centered it's almost as if it's a response to feminism. And it's like a visceral response to feminism. And listen, whatever you think about it is whatever you think about it. But the one thing I don't think anybody's really trying to argue is that feminism has had some type of effect on men in the way they are, in the way they present now, current day. But I'm not saying that all of modern day masculinity is bad, because they kind of line up with, hey, you know what, go out there, build yourself up, get that good job, start that business, get those skills. I think it becomes a question though of intent, right? And I think intent matters greatly in this instance. So the works that you produce or you provide doesn't necessarily by itself make you a masculine man. It's also the intention behind this stuff. So what modern day masculinity will kind of tell you to do is to level up your skill set, get that business, build up your bank, whatever, and do all that fun stuff, primarily so you can feel good. And to me, that's likened to building a house on sand, right? Whereas what I'm proposing a masculine man actually does, or what masculine men actually do, is they will start that business. They will, get that promotion or whatever. They will level up their skill set. They will come up with creative ways to build up their bank in efforts to serve others better. That's what actually leads to longevity. Big difference. So I think the nuance here is the intent, right? Build yourself up so you can feel good, or build yourself up so you can serve others better. Big difference. Lastly, masculine men don't find themselves to be lonely, right? This is one thing that, so for a couple reasons, right? They don't find themselves to be lonely because they're always helping and serving others anyway. So they're always around somebody, at least the people that they serve and at least the people that they help, right? But I've noticed also masculine men tend to find themselves around other masculine men. Like that whole idea, iron sharpens iron, right? That's very, very, or at least maybe my perspective is a little biased in that sense, but it's something I've really noticed, that just masculine men recognize other masculine men, and they typically help each other. They almost uplift each other in a sense that they help expand how they're able to serve others, and so it's actually a pretty cool thing. But I noticed one of the biggest trends, and I spoke of this before on previous episode here, that there are a lot of lonely dudes out there, and yeah. So it's interesting that there seems to be this like epidemic of loneliness for men, and it doesn't have to be that way. But at the end of the day, masculine men typically do not find themselves to be lonely. Now those are all of the qualities that at least a lot of qualities that show up, that are readily apparent in masculine men. I went over why masculine men, or why man was created in the first place. What was man created to do? What was man created to be? Right? So there you have it, right? Give, any questions, any points, topics of concern, comments, whatever, you let me know. But that's what a masculine man is, right? And again, going back to my boys here. Take this with you. Take this with you. Of course, I'm telling you this all the time anyway. And please understand me when I tell you that just because you might not have all of this together yet, you're not supposed to yet. But just keep working little by little each day to build up on all of those I guess statutes of manhood, right? It's really dramatic way to say it, but build up little by little. It's a continuous process, but it's one that you should be in for the long haul for here. Okay. All right. Let me get out of here. Let's get into some other things, random stuff. All right. So listen, I read a lot of books, right? I'm always reading books on different things, business books, philosophical books, history books, whatever. I read a lot. All right. So I figured just try something a little bit different here, where I kind of give my thoughts on what I'm reading. Okay. And see, what if I can give, these books that I'm reading a say cheese and lift kind of stamp of approval here, right? Maybe not as silly, but I just recently read a book entitled Muscular Christianity by Paul Upani, and I hope I'm saying his name right. I get a little tongue twisted with the name sometimes, but hopefully I said his name correctly. But Muscular Christianity is a book about, basically, it's a book about linking the physical fitness or your physicality with your Christianity, basically. And I thought it was let me put it this way. It was a very interesting read, and I was vibing with this book because a lot of what's stated in this book kind of matches up with what the Scowl method is, right? Especially with the physicality and the spirituality, okay? So let me just break down real quick. I want to start by reading the preface, the beginning part of the preface, and then I'll read the beginning part of the intro, and it kind of give you a really good idea on what this book is about. Then I'll get into what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it, and so on and so forth, right? All right, so what the beginning of the preface says, according to Wikipedia, according to Wikipedia, Muscular Christianity is a philosophical movement that originated in England in the mid-19th century, characterized by a belief in patriotic duty, discipline, self-sacrifice, masculinity, and the moral and physical beauty of athleticism. So he also states in the preface that he didn't know that it was a thing, and I did not know that was a thing. For as much as I read, I did not know Muscular Christianity was an actual movement, which is cool. But that also makes me think a little bit. Muscular Christianity was a movement, and it was a thing, and I wonder often now, after having read this book, what happened, right? Like, what is the pathway that Christianity took from going to Muscular Christianity as a movement to this, this soft Christianity that we see now? And here's the thing, in my opinion, and again, it's an opinion, right? So in my opinion, Christianity is super soft. And I don't mean soft in a good way. I mean, I don't mean gentle, but firm, kind, not nice. I don't mean that. That's being soft. It's tender, right? I mean, Christianity is soft in the sense that it's laying down for anything. So I don't understand how Christianity went from muscular Christianity to what it is today. I have my hunch, I have my ideas. Maybe one day I'll discuss those a little bit later on. And this is always something that's open for debate. But that's, I didn't know it was a movement. It does, this book seems very timely to me. Right? All right. So in the introduction, it will give you a really good idea of what's going on, right? So it says, in our era, we have seen increased interest in the combination of spiritual and physical fitness. Wellness and self-improvement initiatives have become very popular. We are a generation that obsessively practices daily healthy habits with the promise of future physical and mental health rewards. These have been made necessary to deal with our collective state of anxiety, confusion, and apathy that have resulted from the world of social media and other modern pressures. If you search enough, you will find exercise posited as a potential solution to these issues because it addresses nearly all of them and more. In my opinion, exercise is the single most effective self-help tool, but self-help by itself can only do so much. It tends to work more like a painkiller, providing only temporary relief, not substantive healing. Self-help strategies are unable to dig deeper than surface issues. They fail to address the deeper philosophical and spiritual issues. As the religious population continues to decline, contemporary women may look to astrology for spirituality. Men, on the other hand, search for something to satisfy the desire for a substantive, difficult, and regimented way of living. This is why they are looking to ancient Stoic philosophers. This is also why, okay, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit here. I'm skipping a little bit. This is why they are, and along with contemporary wisdom from self-improvement figures like, and he names a bunch of people. Most of the contemporary self-improvement figures are successful authors and podcasters with millions of book sales and podcasts with millions of listeners, most of them being male. Whether they know it or not, these influential figures are filling a spiritual lacuna in the hearts of men. That is one heck of an intro, right? And I don't think he was at all wrong in anything he said there. There is a decreased maybe desire, it seems like, but there seems to be a pull away from organized religion as a whole, even though, as I stated in this episode before, earlier on, that a lot of organized religion throughout all of history provided the framework for men to be men. So it's very interesting. You're pulling away from the thing that allows you to be masculine. Anyway, this book digs deep into the like 2/3 of the book is basically about details of your physicality, right? And it's pretty decent there. And then towards the later half or later end of the book, Paul describes a modern version of muscular Christianity. And then he uses a whole bunch of different details. He uses a bunch of studies. He uses a whole bunch of different things, philosophy books, things like that, to get his point across. And I think he does so in a pretty decent job at doing that, right? So I'm going to start with what I didn't like, and it really wasn't that many things, right? It was really just one thing, right? At the end of the book, he gives this, it's like a chapter or a section on practical advice. And I thought it was a little out of place. Reason being, most of this book is more of a philosophical book. It's more of like an intellectual book, right? We're talking about theory here. We're talking about thinking differently. And here's his argument. He's building up his case for linking your physical state of being with your Christianity, or linking your physical with your spiritual, right? And he's giving that framework, and he's basically discussing all of that within that. And then he kind of just goes towards the end, where it's just like, well, here's practical advice on your physical fitness. And it just seemed out of place. In fact, I think it would have been a stronger book without it, because then it's just all theory, all thinking. And then if he wanted to do it, like, he could have done a follow-up book where it's just like, okay, here we're working on the physicality portion of it, right? And I understand why potentially he would put that in there and have that in there. But for me, it kind of just, I basically like kind of skimmed through it, and then I forced myself to read it and see what was going on. But I'm also a trainer too, so a lot of this stuff is kind of just like, okay, I get it. I'm probably not the audience for that last section. But again, so that's why I think the book is stronger without that last section. Now, my most favorite part of this book actually is on page 106. And it's in a section that he's describing like the virtues of athletics, right? And he talks about the virtues of bodybuilding. And I thought it was very interesting, to a point where he even had this quote, and I wrote it down because it was pretty poignant. He basically calls bodybuilding the most physical manifestation of personal development. And it was good. It was I like that kind of take on it. That actually made me smile when I read that, because I'm just like, you know what? And I mean, then he describes it, and he uses a couple pages to describe that idea, and then he links it back to Christ. And I was just like, good on you. I thought that part kind of made the book for me. No, don't get me wrong. There's a lot of good information in there, and and it's pretty easy to follow as well. So that's what I really liked about it. Now, what I thought was probably the most surprising part was the amount of real estate that he gave to kind of debunking the passivity of Christians. I that was Now, I didn't think there was anything wrong with that. I actually tend to agree with the statements that he made on those pages. I just didn't expect him to give put so many words to kind of debunking, passive Christians, right? Or, being a pacifist, right? It just kind of caught me off guard a little bit. So let's count it as a pleasant surprise. Okay. So there you have it, right? That's Muscular Christianity by Paul Upani. It gets the the Sage He's and Lift stamp of approval. All right, let's keep it pushing. All right, so I was recommended this, or I was sent this recommendation to watch this video by one of my clients, and it was of this gentleman by the name of Tristan Harris. He was testifying before Congress on the, I guess, what was the exact wording? Basically, he was testifying before Congress on the issues with persuasive technology, so persuasive tech, and that sounded like a mouthful, but then when he actually went to go describe what that actually is, oh man. So let me backtrack a little bit, right? So he testified before Congress like 4 years ago. It was around the 2020 election. So this happened a while ago, and it's very interesting to see this video still be really relevant to the things that are going on right now concerning tech. But he describes, again, he uses the term persuasive technology. So for a little bit of background, Tristan is the co-founder of the Center for Humane Technology. It's a nonprofit group that basically discusses the potential pitfalls in this persuasive technology. And they focus on how basically they focus on the impacts that technology has on our on humanity as a whole. But not even just humanity as a whole, but like how it steers, and this is what they quote and I pulled from their website, how technology steers our thoughts, our behaviors, and our actions. So simply put, they want to focus on they focus on you actually using tech to benefit humanity. And what they point out is, again, the pitfalls, because it looks like tech is being used for the benefit of humanity, but it's actually creating more issues than it's solving. So this gentleman, Tristan, testified before Congress to basically to reveal and to discuss and to, I guess, unveil the hidden pitfalls of the use of persuasive tech, which really, if you think, the main point of persuasive technology is to make money, right? So already, whenever you get that to be your bottom line, you're opening yourself up for some issues. The big problem here, as Tristan describes in that hearing, the big problem is tech is becoming too powerful, and with the addition of AI, it's becoming almost scary. So the understanding that I have of what he describes as persuasive technology is any technology that gets you to think or act differently. And that by itself might not be a bad thing, because there's some technology that gets you to think and act better, or in a positive manner, right? But what we're finding is that most of it doesn't, right? And for very, very specific reasons, right? The moral, like he mentioned in the hearing, that moral outrage is more popular. So because moral outrage is more popular, these algorithms are going to pump up and show you more of the moral outrage. And it's just simple things like that end up causing harm to humanity as opposed to benefiting humanity. And in this hearing, he also goes over how likes and followers and pull to refresh in this endless scrolling loop or whatever, how that was all started, why it was all started, and how those items created what he called asymmetric power, that's leaning heavily towards the technology, and by default then the tech companies. So what the persuasive tech does is it basically hooks you, brings you in, it gets your attention. And so it comes down to two things. It gets your attention, and then it makes sure that it keeps your attention. And the methods that the persuasive technology uses to do this, now mind you, remember, I'm not just talking like persuasive technology as if it's some nebulous thing. I'm talking about these algorithms. Facebook has an algorithm. YouTube has an algorithm. All the social media platforms have an algorithm. Amazon has an algorithm, right? And it's like all of these companies have tech that basically boils down to an algorithm that picks and chooses, that decides what you're going to see. And what Tristan is saying, and what he was saying in that hearing, is not only does it decide what you're going to see, it's basically telling you what to think about what you saw. And it's basically telling you what to feel about what you saw. So it's very easy. Like, you can imagine the slippery slope we are currently on with the adoption of AI, because then AI is largely predictive. So you don't even have to interact as much with the AI or with YouTube or anything like that to be affected by it. Okay. Now, as an aside, as it pertains to attention, I hear a lot of people say that attention is the new currency, and I don't know if I fully agree with that. It's more so. I still think money is money. I still think money is the currency. It's just the pathway to money has changed a little bit in modern times. So the dominant pathway to money in modern times is attention, whereas maybe the dominant pathway to money in the past was probably just coming up with a good product or service. I mean, the truth is, nowadays, you don't even have to come up with something good. You just have to have a bunch of followers behind it. Right. So, and I mean, and it happens time and time again, right? Like, how many times have you gone on Amazon to purchase something that has a lot of reviews, and there are a lot of high 5-star reviews, just to find out that the product is trash, or it wasn't even, I might get myself in trouble by saying anything more, but you get the point there, right? Like, all you need are some followers or some people to say that, some people behind it, some reviews or whatever, and the general public will automatically assume it's good. That's the social proof. I mean, there are psychological papers written on the idea in and of itself to say that, like, look, you could have two different products, or I'm sorry, two of the exact same product, and one product that doesn't have any reviews or any followers or anything behind it, and the other product does. Again, they're exactly the same thing, and people actually view the same product as more favorable over the other product that's the exact same thing, just because there's social proof behind it. So it's just like, you could easily manipulate that, scam that, and what's happening apparently is that this algorithm is putting that on steroids, and it's just it's in overdrive. So you're constantly being fed the stuff that it thinks that you want to see. And then you watch it and then you change to it. So it's just it's a scary process. It's an interesting process, but it is a very scary process because it's manipulation 110% at its finest. Again, we've moved past the idea of human validation, and we are in the world of an algorithm's validation. Because most of the videos and most of everything that you see, anything on the internet, is recommended to you, typically not by other humans. Typically is recommended by an algorithm. I mean, and I kind of get the irony here. I'm posting this on a whole bunch of media sites that depend on algorithms to feed this content to you all. I get it. So there's a little tug of war going with me personally concerning that, right? But also ultimately my hope is that I'm putting out decent information and I'm bringing awareness and I'm trying to build everybody up. But I also wonder how much of that is actually going to get out. That's So as I watched the video, and I listened to Tristan's testimony, a couple things came to mind. One really sharply came into focus was who's going to regulate this, right? Like who we know we have a problem here. We recognize that we have, multiple issues across these platforms. Who's going to solve them, right? Because there's already stuff, at least at that time, there were provisions written into law or written into different bills or whatever. And I forgot exactly what the number was called or what it was called, but it was like basically saying that social media platforms and all these various platforms cannot be held responsible for any of the wrongdoings of its users. And part of me kind of feels like maybe that wasn't the best choice, right? But then it's just like, it's also it's a tough issue because then what happens if you have, person A is always on social media. Person A believes a bunch of lies that are being propagated on social media. Let's just, that sounds kind of familiar. And then person A goes out and tries to do some harm to person B. Who's responsible? Of course, person A is responsible, right? Right? Because, they're responsible for their own actions. But if this technology is as good as we fear it is, then there's a really good chance that the social media, that and additional platforms, that the persuasive technology changed the way that person A actually thought and changed the way that person A felt and then changed the way person A acted. So then that means that large in part, the persuasive technology is responsible for the harm that person A caused. It's a slippery slope. So I think my question again comes in. So who's going to regulate that? So we can't necessarily trust humanity to, I'm not going to say humanity, like the general public to do that, because the general public is consistently consuming this stuff. So, and I don't think that works out for the general public to kind of like self-govern as a whole, right? Because there's too many conflicting ideas and there's too many conflicting points of view. So then the next question is, does the government? And I don't know if that's the answer either, because we would ask the government to regulate information that gets to us. Yeah, that sounds great. So then what is it, right? Do we place more rules and regulations on the tech companies as to how they can use their algorithms, and then how do you enforce that? Because in another part of any rule and any regulation is like you put in these rules and regulations, especially if it comes from government, you almost automatically create a black market for whatever that is, right? It happened with cigarettes, it happened with drugs, it happens with everything. So it's just like, would you benefit humanity the most by regulating these tech companies or by regulating the what these algorithms can do? Or are you creating a bigger monster by doing so? I don't know the answer to that one. But it's an intriguing thought. It's a little scary too because, again, the AI layer that is really coming to the forefront of the tech industry as a whole, right? It's like I see reports where it's like, oh, it's fizzling out. No, it's not. It's already integrated, right? We were talking about AI 4 years ago, and we were talking about AI probably 40 years before that. And now it's just like, because we're not talking about it as much, maybe? No, it's already integrated. So we potentially have a lot of issues because, again, that AI layer places a whole, I mean, it's a bunch of steroid shots to persuasive technology as is already, where they can come up with and I think it was aptly named your voodoo doll, basically, without even really understanding who you are. They can predict your actions with 80% accuracy, apparently, based on a few of the Cambridge studies. And I'm just like, oh man, clearly that bothers me. Clearly that bothers me. And then the next thing that I was thinking that really just came to mind, and I'm just like so who determines what truth is, right? So he gave an example of like, as if it was a negative thing, of course, right? Like he basically gave an example of when he was explaining that no one, like, even if you're not actively engaged in any social media or anything online, like you stay off the internet altogether, you're still affected by these persuasive technologies. And then it's just like, well, how? Because somebody else, somewhere, wherever you go, is affected by these persuasive technologies. And he brought up the example of anti-vaccine conspiracy theories. And I just sat there, and that really made me think differently. It actually took me to a different spot here because it's just like, wait a minute, hold on. Because, I feel a different type. I don't know. I have different thoughts or different viewpoints on conspiracy theories as a whole. But what he was explaining was that, you believe one conspiracy theory, you're more likely to believe a whole bunch of others. And this persuasive technology will continue to feed you those conspiracy theories because you believe that one or you looked at that one. So the way he was presenting it, it was almost as if he was like, they are further propagating lies. But here's a question. Who becomes the curator of truth? Who determines what is true and what is not? And how do you regulate that? So it's one of those things where another thing I heard from, I was listening to some other podcast, and they posed a certain solution of like, okay, yeah, we believe in freedom of speech. Cool, perfect. But we don't believe in freedom of reach. So freedom of speech doesn't necessarily mean freedom of reach. And I'm just like, okay, cool. How are you regulating that? Again, how do you regulate something like that? When you're saying, when a group, like, is it based on majority or something like that? Like, hey, everybody thinks that this actually happened, so that it must have actually happened. Like, that's a terrible way of going. And yeah, sure, that didn't cause any problems throughout all of history. So it's just like, so how do you regulate the truth? How do you regulate what gets put out there? Like, it's a slippery slope we're on concerning technology. And I think the best thing that any of us can do is, first of all, don't do the endless scrolling thing, right? That's just the worst, right? But I think we need to put technology in its proper place as a people, as humanity, right? there are people chasing followers. There are people chasing likes. There are people chasing that next hit of the video, that next reel, that next post, right? I think as a collective, as humanity, we need to kind of get to a point where we're just like, nah, we're good, right? I don't need to see all this. I don't need to continue to scroll. And I understand what you're trying to do, right? Like, I think at some point it comes down to us again. Now, are we going to make any moves concerning that? I don't know. But I don't necessarily feel great about government regulating what information gets out there, government regulating the truth, or even lies. I don't feel great about government regulating that too much, right? I definitely don't feel great about tech companies regulating that, because at the end of the day, tech companies are only trying to make money. They're trying to make money. Point blank. That's where these algorithms and stuff came from in the first place. How can we maximize the amount of money we make? And our money is based on bringing these people in and getting their attention so we can bring advertisers on and keep pumping them full of, hey, this. So you can't quite trust them to do the right thing either. Because, I mean, plus, if that were the case, we wouldn't be in this situation in the first place. So then it really comes down to us. It comes down to the people. So I mean, and I don't have it all figured out. Don't get me wrong. I would love to talk to some of you all about this one, because there has to be some solution somewhere, right? And I don't even have all the information. It's just one of those things that I do see as imperative for us to not annihilate ourselves. I think this is a problem that we need to solve. So what do we do here? What if it's up to us, what do we do? So first and foremost, whenever something, especially when things are heated and they're hot topics, right? Whenever that stuff comes out, whenever that because it always happens, it'll always happen, go to as many different sources as you possibly can. As many different sources as you possibly can. That kind of somewhat alleviates some of the mess. Like, so it basically says like, hey, look, it's telling these crazy algorithms that, the best way I can explain it is just dealing with like politics, because it's so incendiary, right? It was like, if you typically look at just conservative stuff, well, start looking at liberal stuff. You might not even be able to stomach it. I get it, right? Or if you look at mostly liberal stuff, start looking at conservative stuff. You might get mad as I don't know what. But the thing is, only that way can you really get somewhat of a total picture. Because mind you, the algorithms are only going to pump up the moral outrage from both sides, right? So you gotta almost do your research. So before you start to line yourself up in a particular camp, or before you start to line your actions up with this, this is what I believe, get all the information first, right? And a lot of times, social media is not the way. Sometimes you gotta get some books, read some books, right? Find some sources. There's people posting stuff, articles and stuff like that are outside of these algorithms, and they're posting it all the time. Even though if you go to Google, which is a search engine, they're using the algorithm too. But whatever. Find, collect, curate as much data as you possibly can before you get dead set on a particular belief. Also, talk to people. One thing that I find that we're completely missing now is just like, we'll line up, we'll have social media kind of confirm what we're thinking and what we're feeling. It was like, yeah, that's right, I'm mad at this because this, and this. And that is stuff, the other stuff is not even true. Whatever. But then when it comes down to actually having a conversation with somebody, they are completely stumped. They're stuck. So my suggestion is, look, first, curate a lot more information than what you're getting right now. Find different sources. Read books, right? Do things like that. Number 2, talk to people. Because a lot of times, again, we're only getting the most popular stuff on any social media platform is the stuff that causes the most outrage. It's the shortest stuff because we have the attention span of a rock now, but then it's the shorter stuff that eliminates all nuance. And then you get the stuff that people are just like, oh, I hate all of this people and I hate all of that. And that's the stuff that it gets fed into your feed. So how about you get off of it and you actually just talk to people, because then you figure out like, oh, wait, hold on. I'll never forget. It was, well, okay, I don't have enough time. This is already running. But it's just like, there are situations in which people who, especially after COVID, right? And I understand that there's still some remnants of that weirdness that happened during the lockdowns and all that fun stuff. But neighborhoods aren't really neighborhoods anymore. They're just separate, isolated silos where people live. Right? There used to be a time where everybody was friendly. You knew what was going on a block. And nobody has an idea now. Right? Nobody talks to anybody. But they're for sure on their phones. They're for sure on their computers, on their laptops, on their tablets, linking to people on social media. Now, here's the thing. That's great if you can't reach them. Doesn't make sense if they're right next to you. So it's like, so solution number 2. Go out and actually talk to people. Now, there's a little caveat there, because some of the people who are jerks on social media are actually jerks in real life. so it's you're running a little bit of a risk, but sometimes you just need to listen. Just listen. Well, hear them out. Why do they think this stuff? Why is this person this way? Right? Like, that, I think, is part of the solution. I don't think it's the entirety of the solution, but I think if you do those 2 things, you'll be in better shape. You'll be in better standing, and you won't be so whipped back and forth by this bit of outrage or that bit of outrage. You'll be able to see clearly through the mess and actually see what's going on, or what you will have enough information to form an actual belief that's not cultish. So those are my suggestions. Okay, that's what I try to do, and hopefully it would benefit you all as well. Okay. Whew. All right, peeps. I know this episode is long too. Look, I'm gonna make my mad dash, but again, I appreciate y'all coming through. I appreciate y'all watching. I appreciate y'all listening. I appreciate y'all time. If there's anything here that you want to discuss, you know where to drop a comment, hit me up. You know where all of this stuff is. Again, I can't stress this enough. I definitely appreciate you for just giving me a little bit, giving this crazy guy a little bit of your time. All right. But until then, listen, I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you just got finished listening to the Scowl Method Podcast, your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. I'm going to see y'all on the next episode. Take care.